Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Friday morning, the last week and the last full day of the month of July 31st, 2026. I'm so sad. I love the month of July because it's the height of summer. Oh my goodness, going by way too quickly. But we have a great show for you today. We have 3 segments this morning after we give you, of course, the news and the weather with the amazing Father Robert Spitzer. Now, I know he really needs no introduction. You know him so well from his great work at the Magis Center, his great work with our good friend Doug Keck on Father Spitzer's Universe, and so many other outlets on which Father Spitzer works, and he produces so much great material. He's been a Catholic educator for many, many years and has such a great background and knowledge of the Catholic faith and science, numerous degrees. We don't have time this morning to go into them all because if we did, it would take up most of our airtime. Suffice it to say, he is a wonderful, faithful teacher of the Catholic faith, and he joins us this morning all about his new Catholic study Bible, published by Our Sunday Visitors, Science, Reason, and Faith. Now, I've got it right here, received it the other day, and it's quite large, but it is well worth your time and your investment because it is beautifully done. And we're going to break it down for you this morning, or at least try to, because as you know, Father Spitzer is such a wealth of information, especially on all things Catholic, and talking about why he decided that this Bible, this particular Bible, was needed. So we'll discuss with Father, and then he has some great ideas in terms of combining this in sort of, I would say, a study package, because if you get this Bible, it would help you also, as he will explain, to get his beautiful book, his most recent, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. So again, this study Bible is all about science and reason and faith, and then the book goes into much more detail on the Blessed Mother, on Jesus, on all the miracles. He talks about Fatima, he talks about Guadalupe, he talks about Lourdes, and many other miracles, of course, related to our Lord, especially his thoughts on the Shroud of Turin in that book, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. So 3 segments with the incredible Father Spitzer. And by the way, I am going to have him on again because there's so many questions that we have about faith, science, and reason and how we can help people see that they don't conflict. Second hour of the program, we are going to be chatting once again with Dr. Peter Howard, sharing an interview we did with him a while ago because we really want to make sure this sells out. It's doing really well ticket-wise, though. The Americans Saint Conference in September, America's Saint Conference coming up. And this is in relationship, of course, to the amazing Archbishop Fulton Sheen, his beatification. Dr. Peter Howard, again, will be joining us. He is the lead person on this. And we'll talk all about the conference, which is phenomenal, and it has so many great speakers, including many of them from EWTN. Wrapping up on a Friday morning, we are going to be chatting with Tyler Blanski, a beautiful book about how to stay a faithful father and dad. And the book has a really cool title. It's called Find Your Fight. And Tyler has been on with us before. He's joining us again. And he was recently in our EWTN studios in Irondale taping some shows. And so you can watch for that as well on the network. Right now, we do need to check the weather for you and the news. Let's get started with what's happening weather-wise across the nation on a Friday morning, the last day of July 2026. Lots of things going on with the weather this morning, friends. The National Weather Service is saying heat is building up in the west. We have severe thunderstorms and heavy rain in the upper Midwest and Mississippi Valley. And then we have extreme critical fire weather in the northwest that's coming in tomorrow. More details, the heat wave is over the southwest and it's intensifying, peaking and expanding into the intermountain west and northern high plains this weekend. Severe storms and heavy rainfall expected over parts of the upper Midwest to the mid-Mississippi Valley today, and then critical to extreme critical fire weather conditions from the northwest and the northern Great Basin on Saturday and Sunday. Right now, it's a few minutes past the hour. Hope your Friday, last day of July, is going well again. Let's take a look at the news here on EWTN. EWTN News reporting this morning a major health system in Michigan facing a six-figure payout to one of its former physician assistants, whom the institution fired after she refused to adhere to LGBT-related policies. The University of Michigan Health West system will also create now a religious accommodation for employees who do not wish to assist with transgender-related transitions or so-called transitions or procedures or use LGBT pronouns in a way that violate religious beliefs. The legal group First Liberty Institute announcing the settlement on July 29th, revealing that Valerie Kloosterman and her attorneys would receive $410,000 in damages from the health institution. Kloosterman is a Christian and had worked at the hospital for 17 years, beginning in 2004, fired in August of 2021 after she refused to use LGBT pronouns and make referrals for transgender-related transition drugs and surgeries, that according to a 2022 lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court. A Pandora's box, as a Bishop of Darwin, Charles Gauci, described voluntarily assisted dying in 2004, is now being thrown wide open in Australia. Darwin is the capital of the Northern Territory of the country, which is expected to legalize the practice of assisted dying within the next few weeks. Now, if that happens, so-called voluntary assisted dying, or VAD, will be legal in every state and every territory of Australia. Archbishop Anthony Fisher of Sydney arguing this idea of telehealth has turned into teledeath and he's pushing for protections for Catholic healthcare institutions.
One thing is that the church in those countries that already have experience of euthanasia can help with educating people in other countries about its very real risk. How quickly we went in this country from having no euthanasia legal at all to now more than 14,000 people have applied for it, more than 7,000 have died from it. Very quickly, all the so-called safeguards, there are pushes then to remove them one by one. So I think the experience in countries like Australia, like Holland, like Canada, can be instructive for the church in other parts of the world when it's trying to make the case for being reverent and safeguarding human life. The push, for instance, at the moment here for telehealth, so-called, which is really teledeath, is to use the long-distance means such as the internet and the telephone to grant euthanasia to people without any serious consultation with a doctor, without any doctor having ever met them or talked through with them what care they really need, what their present needs for palliative care might be, or for other kinds of medical treatment.
Vatican News reporting just last week on July 24th, the Labour Party, the current ruling party in Australia, voting to support removing any federal barriers to teleconsultations through approving euthanasia and amended its constitution to allow members of parliament a conscience vote on future voluntary assisted dying legislation. And with 1 year to go until World Youth Day of 2027, the local organizing committee hard at work as it's moving preparations from groundwork to full implementation across all sectors, including international cooperation, pilgrim services, accommodations, transportation safety, medical care, and communications. World Youth Day occurs every few years and gathers together millions of young Catholics, and the 2027 edition will be held in South Korea, the capital there, from August 3rd to August 8th. It will be the second World Youth Day to take place in Asia, following the 1995 one in Manila, and the first country in a country where Christianity is a minority faith. Mark Mayfield tells us the president says a major deal to disarm the Palestinian militant group Hamas has been reached.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the Board of Peace has reached an agreement that would involve the complete disarmament of all armed groups in Gaza. Trump says as part of the deal, Israel will withdraw from the enclave and a new Palestinian government will be created. The agreement is set to be implemented in carefully structured phases. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, a former Israeli government spokesperson, Ilan Levy, is viewing the announcement with some caution.
We have to be very skeptical of Hamas, which has tried at every opportunity to slip through every nook and cranny to ensure its survival and sabotage peace agreements.
And again, in a post on Truth Social, the president saying the Board of Peace are reaching an agreement, and that would involve the complete disarmament of all armed groups in Gaza as well. Trump also saying as part of that deal, Israel will withdraw from the enclave and a new Palestinian government could be created. The agreement is set to be implemented again in carefully structured phases. Senate Republicans are blocking a resolution that would have required the president to withdraw U.S. troops from Iran, with Republican Senators Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul joining Democrats in support.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 15. The motion is not agreed to.
Thursday's vote came as lawmakers are continuing to debate the expanding conflict, with concerns growing over the safety of U.S. service members and rising energy prices. The Senate considering similar war powers measures multiple times as the Trump administration continues military operations and negotiations over the future of the conflict. Scott Carr tells us the president is also holding a cabinet meeting at Camp David today. He has details.
The meeting at the Maryland presidential retreat comes after the U.S. and Iran resumed attacks after the collapse of a ceasefire agreement. Reports say some Republicans have expressed concerns to the White House as the war continues, with midterm elections less than 100 days away. After the meeting at Camp David, Trump's expected to head to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey for the weekend. I'm Scott Carr.
The nomination of Todd Blanche as Attorney General could be withdrawn by President Trump in response to two Republican holdouts to Blanche's approval. In a Truth Social post yesterday, the president saying he has no objection to temporarily withdrawing the nomination if Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis do not do the right thing. Both have expressed reservations about confirming Blanche over Trump's proposed anti-weaponization fund. Trump's post came after the Senate Judiciary Committee postponed the vote, and that had been planned for yesterday. Ross Cullen tells us Spain sending in military reinforcements responding to a surge of migrants crossing into its territory.
Residents in the Spanish territory woke up on Friday with thousands of Moroccan immigrants sleeping in the streets after huge numbers of people overwhelmed a small brigade of Spanish frontier patrols and crossed the border between the North African country and the Spanish semi-enclave.
Yesterday, hundreds of migrants crossed the border of Morocco into a tiny Spanish territory on the northern tip of Morocco, one of Spain's two territories on the African continent. The migrants are reportedly attempting to flee into Europe after Spain recently launched a program to provide legal status for some 500,000 undocumented migrants. Spanish authorities say about 2,000 migrants have already made their way over the border in the past few days, and around 20 have died trying. Sarah Lee Kessler tells us a New Jersey man who pleaded guilty to ramming his vehicle into a Jewish religious group's headquarters in New York will now be freed, and soon.
Dan Sohail was sentenced to time served this week, though he'll have to do a few more days in jail before being released next week. A Brooklyn federal court judge denied a request by prosecutors to keep Sohail behind bars, citing a psychiatric evaluation and saying the attack was not motivated by anti-Semitism. Sohail has already spent 6 months locked up. He admitted to ramming his vehicle into the Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in Brooklyn back in January. I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
And coming up in just a few minutes, we are going to check in with the one, the only, Father Robert Spitzer. Do yourself a favor and grab a copy of his new study Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith. But make sure that you have a big enough briefcase or bag because it's large. It's quite large, but it's amazing. And it's published by our Sunday Visitor. We will discuss up next on a Friday morning. What an honor. I get 3 whole segments on a Friday morning with the one, the only, Father Robert Spitzer. It really doesn't need any introduction, but just in case maybe you're a new listener, he's a prominent Jesuit priest, philosopher, and educator, and he is known for his extensive work in theology and philosophy. The co-founder of Healing the Culture and serves as a president of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith, focusing on intersection of faith and reason. And of course, you know him well from Father Spitzer's Universe and his many appearances on EWTN radio and TV. This morning, 2 new publications to discuss, including a brand new book by Father and also a beautiful study Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith, Catholic Study Bible. Father, welcome back to Catholic Connection. Always great to have you on, my dear.
great honor to be with you again, Teresa.
Well, I'm holding this beautiful Bible in my hands, and of course, thank you so much for sending it to me. And you know me, as a reporter, I love connecting the dots, and I think this introduction that you give for up front as to why this particular Bible is so great. But share with our listeners why you thought this was important to give us a Science, Reason, and Faith study Bible.
Well, I noticed, in my teaching career, which has actually been pretty extensive with young people, but now these people would be definitely at the top of the millennial range. So anyway, I noticed they had basically 4 or 5 different kinds of questions, and a lot of them, were turned off, not just to the Old Testament, though that was the majority. A lot of them were turned off to the Bible in general because they got, maybe a wrong current from Genesis, or they didn't know how to interpret certain statements of Moses, or they heard something about the historicity of the miracles in the Old Testament, or even the historicity of Jesus, which of course is unquestionable from a historical, historiographical point of view. But nevertheless, they hear these things and they don't know the evidence. So I just thought, all right, I got to straighten it out, and I want to do it in one big study Bible. And Scott Reichert from OSV, our Sunday Visitor, they publish Bibles. He came and he said, hey, I got an idea. How about, a Science, Reason, Faith study Bible, to put all the things together? And I just said, could I be the guy, to do this? And he said, yeah, we're thinking of you. And I said, well, that's great. I mean, so I was doing cartwheels because, this is like a lifetime of activity. I could talk about all the evidence for Jesus, not just from Richard Bauckham and the Third Quest for the Historical Jesus and N.T. Wright. I could talk about the Shroud of Turin and all the scientific evidence for Jesus' passion and resurrection and glory. I could talk about the Eucharistic miracles in the context of a Bible. I can talk about, the Genesis thing. Well, what is the scientific picture of creation? How can you reconcile that with the biblical picture of creation? Of course, that just goes back to Pope Pius XII, who gave us the explanation way back in 1952 in Humani Generis, basically saying, the Bible is to give us sacred truths necessary for salvation. That's not what science does. Science gives us an empirical, mathematical method, to explain the physical universe. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't force sacred scripture to do science, and you can't force science to do sacred scripture. Pope Pius XII said, let them have their own domains. They'll be reconcilable in that. And they are. And so,
they back each other up. Right.
They back each other up, each according to their own method. And so I thought, I got to straighten this out so people don't get turned off. And then, all a student needs to do is hear about, even in a religion class, Moses said to execute all the men, women, and children in conquered Canaanite lands. And, of course, they look at that and they go, yike, how could this be in the Bible? It's a terrible statement, and that does it for me. I've had it with the Bible. And, of course, they don't read it in context. And Ratzinger, when he was a cardinal, gave us very good rules to interpret, well, what's inspired and what's not inspired, in a biblical text. Well, we know that every biblical text is inspired. You just got to know what parts are inspired. You don't want to take the culturally, historically relative parts and call them, inspiration, because that means that they're going to be right forever, right? They're going to be infallible. And, of course, a culturally relative part of the statement can't be infallible, but the interior, as, Pope Benedict, as Ratzinger would call it, right? The interior is infallible. And he says, well, what's the easiest way to check, what's inspired? What is consistent with Jesus, the fullness of revelation? That's the first thing we look to. So would Jesus have said, kill all the men, women, and children? No, he wouldn't have. So he says, okay, well, there's something that's culturally relative here. There's something that's interior to this that's not culturally relative. That's still the Word of God. And he says, it's very simple. All you need to see is, well, what was Moses' objective here? Moses was trying to tell the people, don't appropriate the Canaanite customs, right? In other words, And so he made a discrimination. He said if they come out and they fight you fiercely, he says just that those people are going to be trouble, and you're going to wind up appropriating their customs. And his way from a warrior society, right? And he did live in a warrior society, was basically, well, you kill the competition. But if they didn't fight you fiercely, only lightly, or they didn't fight you at all, then of course you could appropriate them into the Israelite culture. Now, would Jesus have done that? No. But on the other hand, that's the culture that Moses lived in.
Right.
That's what he understood. That was his best judgment. But his best judgment, that part of the revelation, basically Pope Benedict calls it the husk, right? It's like the skin or the husk, which of course you can peel back. But the inner core is do not appropriate the customs of the Canaanites, sacrificing their children to Moloch and so forth and so on. Don't you be doing that. So Moses is trying to, as it were, get a pure start for his brand of what we call Yahwism, right? Now today we call it, obviously the Israelite revelation in the Old Testament. So you can at least explain that with Ratzinger's methodology and show how over the course of time these things change. And, of course, there is moral development in the Old Testament.
Right, but you also have to, as you said, starting out, Father, it has to be in context. And people will read a particular verse and get all upset about it, and then they'll walk away, as you said. But what I think is really important that you did in the very beginning of this Bible, the study Bible, Chapter 1, Foundational Questions Concerned with the Methods of Science, Scriptural Interpretation, and History. Right out of the gate, a very powerful statement from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And let me read this, because I think this sets the stage for everything. Though faith is above reason, there can never be any real discrepancy between faith and reason, since the same God who reveals mysteries and infuses faith has bestowed the light of reason on the human mind of God. God cannot deny himself, nor can truth ever contradict truth. Consequently, methodological research in all branches of knowledge, provided it is carried out in a truly scientific manner and does not override moral law, can never conflict with the faith, because the things of the world and the things of faith derive from the same God. See, to me, that is it in a nutshell. God is not going to contradict himself. You can take any story, and you've done this a million times on this show and on Father Spitzer's Universe and in your teaching. Let's just take what happens in the world, for example, when we jump from bed to bed. Okay, we are not meant to sleep around. And what happens with natural law when we do that? All kinds of problems happen, right? Relationships, psychological, physical. Now, that's not a religious statement. In a sense it is, because it's from natural law, but the same God who's giving us the way we were made and for whom is also telling us in science that it doesn't work. So to me, this is a great way to start out this study Bible. Okay, God cannot go against himself. He created everything. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's, that's why we start out the Bible with that quote, because all we have to do is reconcile them. And all the popes, especially Pope Pius XII, because he was the one that came out with Divino Afflante Spiritu and Humani Generis, he gave us the methodologies, to defend, evolution, to defend the reconciliation between Bible and science. But then St. John Paul II, oh my gosh, that guy gave us so many things. And then Pope Benedict, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger.
Yep. Oh, that's the music. Let's take a quick break. We'll continue. We've got 2 new publications from our dear friend, Father Robert Spitzer. This beautiful study Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith. And, of course, a brand new book as well on miracles. And our Lord and our Blessed Mother are in there, of course. We'll be right back. Having a wonderful conversation with our dear friend, Father Robert Spitzer, Father Spitzer's Universe, and so many other wonderful programs and teachings and books and recent publications. We're discussing this morning this beautiful new study Bible, Catholic Study Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith. Father, when you're doing a study Bible, what makes it so? How is it a study Bible?
Well, we put tools in place that will answer questions and teach students on their own how to answer questions. So there's basically a comprehensive introduction before the Old Testament and one before the New Testament. The one before the Old Testament treats like 5 different subjects. So it's treating, obviously, the whole methodology question, inspiration question. What are the documents that the Catholic Church has issued that, shows you how faith and science can come together? How do you interpret, moral, development in the Old Testament? How do you deal with, scientific facts that seem to conflict with Scripture, but each in their own place have relevance? So, for example, that science can't tell us the who of God. Science can tell us that God exists, or, what kind of a God, an unrestricted, uncaused God exists, and philosophy can do that too, but they can't tell you who God is. You're going to need God's own word to do that, so you're going to need Scripture to accompany, otherwise you'll have a personless God, without a heart, and of course, in that, the God of science can be reduced simply to that, but Scripture alone, of course it stands on its own, it doesn't need science, but when you put it together with science and philosophy, and you add the evidence for God, Jesus, life after death, a transphysical soul, Mary, the Eucharist, that validated by science and validated by philosophy and expounded on by philosophy and explained by philosophical theological discourse, all of a sudden it's like the world comes alive, as St. Thomas Aquinas would say. So the first part of the whole idea is to give tools where we can make that complementarity between faith and reason, science and scriptural work and the faith itself that binds them together. We wanted to put all that together. So we have two big comprehensive introductions. So there's about an 80-page introduction to the Old Testament, and it talks about, science and faith. How do you reconcile the two pictures of creation? What's the evidence for God from philosophy, and what's the evidence for God from science? Those proofs are in the introduction. We look at the evidence for transphysical soul, life after death. We then go into the historiography and history of the Old Testament to show you just how much history there is. You just can't write off the Old Testament as a bunch of non-historical myths, as so many people try to do. I mean, there's a strict methodology you can use to make determinations, but there's a huge amount of history in the Old Testament, and it is the Word of God, and you can see it not just in the prophetic books, but even in the historical books and the wisdom books. So, we try to bring all of that out, along with the reconciliation with science, give people the methodological tools. And then before the New Testament, our objective is really strictly almost history, science, and science to validate the history of Jesus and so forth. So I spend like the first part of the New Testament section, really giving a summary of Richard Bauckham's incredibly excellent book, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. Never before has there been such a systematic portrayal of why the Gospels are truly a lineup of eyewitness testimonies. You should never use form critical analysis, which assumes a long period of separation between the actual accounts and the writing of the accounts. For the Gospels, it's 33 years before Mark. So what are we talking about here? This is not even a generation. Has passed by, and of course you can't use form criticism. What you have to use is the assumption of eyewitness testimonies, and Bauckham just gives you the methodology. Who was the eyewitnesses? Who was named? Who was the big eyewitness, for example, in Mark's Gospel? It's Peter, and you can actually show this with a great deal of scriptural justification, because you can see all along, in Mark's Gospel, that it was originally it was told in Aramaic, and that's Peter. He's giving his apologetics and catechetical speeches. He's going around. Mark is his translator into Greek. Mark is his translator into written form. Peter's a fisherman. He doesn't know Greek that well, and certainly cannot write Greek. But Mark is following him, and you can see that all these stories originally in Aramaic were told in the first person plural. We did this, and then we did that, and then and you can hear it. But now somebody has translated it from Aramaic into the third person plural. They did this and they did that to put it in the narrative context, but it leaves behind a Semitism, which makes it very identifiable that Mark was listening to somebody who had undergone this and was telling the story in the first person, and then Mark is translating it into the third person. There's about 10 other reasons for believing that Peter was definitely the source of the Markan gospel, including the details of the passion narrative, a variety of other things that are there. Plus, of course, Mark intersperses some eyewitness testimonies from other people. But then you can see that the so-called Q source was definitely under the control of the Mother Church in Jerusalem, and how carefully those traditions were monitored by the Mother Church in Jerusalem. And Bauckham goes through this. It's the most remarkable thing. So I thought, I'm going to summarize everything here, because if you finish reading the first part of this study Bible, the introduction to the New Testament, and, I had to take Bauckham's really excellent book, which is nearly 500 pages with most of them being footnotes practically, the guy's so exact. But I simplified it, but I didn't take out the complexity and nuance of the argument, because obviously we want to get the richness of all of his research. But you will come away saying, wow, these things really are eyewitness testimonies, and they really did happen. And then what I do is I apply afterwards Joachim Jeremias's historical criteria, like for the miracle accounts and the sayings of Jesus. It's all there. So I go through the historiographical things. Then right after that, I'm looking at the miracles. I'm looking at Jesus' sayings. I'm looking at the Holy Eucharist. Absolutely, you can see that Jesus' intention, just by looking at the Jewish notion of time and how Jesus interpreted it in his Eucharistic words, and then looking at it in light of John 6 and 1 Corinthians 10 and 11, you start putting the puzzle pieces together. There can just be no doubt why every single church father believes in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. The idea that you could interpret John 6 in any other way becomes absolutely crazy in light of what is going on in what I would call this underlying historiography that not only Bauckham, but Joachim Jeremias, and John P. Meyer especially make very, very clear. So I tried to put it all out.
So, Father,
there.
we have to take another break. It's going by way too fast. I think I'm going to have you on for another segment, because there's so many other questions I have on the Bible, but I don't want to miss talking, because this ties right in. Your latest beautiful book, Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. And so we want to dive in a little bit, at least for now, into this book, but I do have a couple of other questions about the Bible when we come back. More with Father Robert Spitzer. Stay tuned. I knew this time would go quickly. I can't believe this is our final segment this morning on a Friday with the amazing Father Robert Spitzer. Don't forget to catch Father and, of course, my good friend Doug Keck on Father Spitzer's Universe. And then check out his great work at the Manchester Center as well for Faith and Reason. Father, beautiful Bible. Talk about the comments in blue, because I find those to be really, really helpful.
Right. So at the beginning of every biblical book, there is a whole blue section right in the introduction that just brings into focus questions of science, history, moral development, and so forth. So the kinds of things that a lot of people are asking questions about, I discuss it in general in the introductory section. And then next to the passage, which causes sometimes neuralgic reactions on the part of younger people, or actually middle-aged and older people, where they just say, this is too much, I can't take it. I put in blue in the margins, right on the side there. So if you go to Genesis 1:1, you'll see that I explain, what does that mean? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so I try to explain that and show you how really that revelation is so unique in the history of religions. And not only that, but it coincides with both the philosophical and scientific picture. So I just try to go through, and wherever there's a curious passage, like that passage I was just talking about, Moses saying, okay, kill every man, woman, and child. I know people are going to react. Or, you have passages where people, say, oh, Cyrus, this is just a myth. There's no Persian emperor that would, or king that would possibly restore already a banished people back to their country and pay for the restoration of the walls. But then I say, oh, yes, there is. There is the discovery of the Cyrus cylinder, which lies in, of course, the British Museum, which goes right back to the time of Cyrus the Great, with the proclamation there about, restoring, the Jewish people to their promised land. So every time I come up, people will say, here's for sure, Joshua couldn't, have, stopped the sun, because if he had done that, obviously that would mean that the Earth stopped in its own rotation around its own axis. And, of course, that would mean that all of the oceans would have emptied and it would have been the end of the Earth. Yes, but that's not, to him it appeared that the sun was stopping. But there are several atmospheric phenomena that can clearly explain why Joshua believed that. And so I just discussed, the various things. You don't have to deny the historicity of what was a sign from God to Joshua, that Joshua obviously used as the foundation for the covenant, restoration of the covenant, and Israel, as being, and the Canaanite lands as being the promised land. So, of course, there's easy explanations without denying the historicity of these events. So whenever I come up with a problematic issue, right on the side there in blue, and the introductions that I give are also in blue, you'll get an explanation of that passage where people can say, oh, I can see why Joshua, way back, in 1,200, would be thinking this, or even 1,100 BC would be thinking this. So, this atmospheric phenomena could look like the sun is actually, standing still in its tracks, etc. So all those things are pretty much, the sun was, stopped emitting its rays is really the Hebrew means. So a blockage could really explain it. So anyway, I'm
looking at 2 Thessalonians, which I love, and you have a whole section before you go into 2 Thessalonians. You have tradition and scripture, which is very important for Catholics to take a look at, because of course our Protestant non-Catholic brothers and sisters have some things to say, because talking about Bible alone and whatnot. So this is really helpful, and you even have in the first letter of St. Paul to Timothy explanations of what it means to be a bishop, what it means to be a deacon. So this is so helpful in so many other ways. Okay, now we have to move on, and we'll have to have you back on for even more information, because I want people to get their hands on this study Bible, which is published by Our Sunday Visitor. And you can also find it, of course, I believe, on our EWTN Religious Catalog and at the Magis Center as well. But this other new book, Father, which is at the EWTN Religious Catalog, I'm looking at it right now, Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. So these two, I think, work together, correct? This wonderful study Bible and this beautiful book.
Yes, that's right. So what that book is intended to do is to really flesh out four major areas. First, the Shroud of Turin and its scientific investigation, which to me gives a very credible preponderance of evidence for the authenticity not only of Jesus' shroud, but also for the resurrection of Jesus on that shroud. So I spend a few paragraphs in the study Bible talking about that evidence. If you want the full boat, in other words, if you really want everything with all the footnotes you can possibly imagine, Christ, Science, and Reason has that there. Again, in the complementarity theme, I take a look at the Eucharistic miracles. Again, I have a few paragraphs on each of those, especially the very, very good scientifically investigated miracles of Buenos Aires, 1996, Tixla, Mexico, 2006, and Sokolka, in 2008. I look, at those, briefly but concisely in the study Bible introductions. However, if you want the full explanation with all the footnotes you could possibly imagine to all of these Eucharistic miracles, as well as the Lanciano miracle, which of course has less validatable scientific evidence because of its age, but nevertheless it does have validatable scientific evidence as well. If you want the real full boat, you go to Christ, Science, and Reason, because of course everything is there. It's footnoted to the hilt with all the original sources. Again, with the Marian miracles, there are three things that are obviously going on. but I start with Guadalupe because there's a lot of really excellent work that's been done scientifically on the tilma. A lot of these things come out in bits and pieces, but if you really want, as I said, I give a brief explanation of this in the Science, Reason, Faith Study Bible, but if you want, again, the full explanation, what's going on, not just with the eyes of the Blessed Virgin, the corneas, the reflections in the corneas of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but what's going on with respect to materials, how the color is embedded, the refractive range of the colors, which are like butterfly wings. When you go through all these things, it's not just the materials, it's not just the pigments, but, there's miracle after miracle after miracle, and then you get to the eyes, and all of the good work.
The eyes,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, the correlative analysis that was done by Jose Aste Tonsman. I just summarize all of that stuff there. I don't give all the mathematics that he uses to correlate the left and the right cornea reflections, but he does it with a 99.1% correlation, which you almost can't get better than that. So, yes, there's just no question in my mind. Those reflections are not cloud gazing. They couldn't be. You couldn't get a correlation between the left and right corneas, which have different curvatures, especially because the Blessed Virgin's head is slightly tilted. You could not get the same point curvatures in both those retinas at all of the various distinctive, so you take the tip of the nose of Bishop Zumarraga, you take, Juan Diego's hat, you take the various points, and you correlate them, with respect to each other, both in the left and the right corneas, taking, the differential and the curvature and the differential from the tilt in the head, and it's almost a perfect correlation. There's just, some people say, I just cloud gazing. I can't see that. But if you do what Jose Aste Tonsman did, you will see it very clear. I just want to bring it out in detail. Now, it mentions that in the Science, Reason, Faith Study Bible, but, the full explanation with the footnotes and the mathematical chart, that you got to go to Christ Science. The same thing, Fatima's Miracle of the Sun. Why this has faded off the picture of spectacular miracles, I do not know why. I think it is one of the most remarkably good, 40,000 witnesses, too, on top of everything else. And Stanley Yaki is fantastic. He was both a priest and a PhD physicist who wrote a book called God and the Sun at Fatima and other articles that are really explicative. And it just shows you're going to need some kind of a lens that's at least a half a mile in diameter in the middle of the atmosphere, maybe 3 to 4 miles above the Covidi area there in Fatima, and take a look at the dynamics of that. And whether you try to explain it by, means of an ice lens, or whether you try to explain it by means of a supernatural lens that's out there, an ice lens, to put together all the unusual ingredients, to produce an ice lens of this magnitude. It's huge, right? Half a mile in diameter. And, it's going to approach the Earth, come back from the Earth, refract the sun enough to dry all the ground, and the clothes of the people have been raining all night, et cetera, to put it together so people 30 miles away could see it, and so forth. Hey, this is, the odds of that happening on the exact time and date and place that the Blessed Virgin Mary predicted 3 times to the children. That the odds of that happening are 1 in 10 raised to the 1,260th to 1. So in other words, one chance in a trillion, and just multiply those trillions out by 100 times. And then, what you explain it naturally, it's a miracle. Explain it with a supernatural lens, it's a miracle. And it's a spectacular miracle. And it happened exactly when the Blessed Virgin Mary told the children 3 times it would happen. That's why they had 40,000 people gathered there. So you put it all together and you say, hey, why aren't we talking about this? The Blessed Virgin Mary is real today. She was back in Fatima and Lourdes, too. You tell me how 7,000 naturalistically inexplicable, at least medically observed, right? So in other words, these are, medically validated, but not to the standards of, the Lourdes Medical Commission with all, 7 things in place. People just don't do it. They hesitate, but there's 7,000 of them that have no naturalistic explanation that have been investigated by the Lourdes Medical Commission. Now, you tell me how 7,000 naturalistically inexplicable healings can happen in a single place. I mean,
Right.
healings where you have instantaneous regeneration of tissue, instantaneous regeneration of bone, like almost 2 inches of bone. You don't even have enough material in your natural material body to produce that much bone, and certainly not instantaneously. And the two ends of this is Pierre de Rudder, where his leg was literally swinging freely, could turn 180 degrees in either direction because the tips of the bones where he had, a tree had fallen on his leg, that they were already necrosed. They were already dead. Dead is dead. You can't make dead alive except through a miracle. And I'm telling you, that bone was completely reconstituted instantaneously, connecting the two dead parts of the bone. Pierre de Rudder, when he was cured, he had his 3, osteopaths that had investigated him. One of them, world famous, from Switzerland, who came and witnessed him. And the guy was a total atheist. And Pierre de Rudder answered his door when the guy came to investigate, and he jumped up and down in front of him. The guy fainted, so he couldn't believe it, seeing what he saw. But he became a Christian, said he was happier than he ever had been. So, we've got so many of these testimonies, Lourdes, Fatima, and I just thought, hey, let's bring all the science to light.
Yeah, and you know what? Jesus is always telling us, Father, come and see. Come and see. And there's so much to see. And this is what frustrates me so much, because so many people just make a decision on emotion or on their own personal feelings, and they don't dig more deeply. And once they start, and maybe because if they read a book like yours, or if they grab this study Bible, they will see clearly the incredible and extensive evidence for everything our Lord has given us, all the miracles, and especially his death and resurrection. Father, we need like 3 more hours. We're going to schedule for another interview because I have a ton of questions I didn't get to ask. Thank you so much. So get these 2 books, Science, Faith, and Reason Bible Study, the Study Bible, and also Christ, Science, and Reason. So as my wonderful producer, Richard, says, we have to get our head helmets because our brains explode when we talk to Father Spitzer. He's just so knowledgeable and just so well-informed on all things Catholic and beyond. So I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Once again, his new study Bible is entitled Science, Reason, and Faith, Catholic Study Bible, from our friends at Our Sunday Visitor. Ignatius Press, I think I mentioned this, I'm not sure if I did, published his beautiful book, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. And we also, of course, have that on our EWTN religious catalog. Coming up on hour number 2, we are going to, as we mentioned earlier, continue to promote this beautiful conference coming up all about Fulton Sheen. And what's great, as you'll hear from Dr. Peter Howard, is that this event that's coming up in September, of course, is happening at the same time of the beatification taking place in St. Louis. And the speakers, as we said, many of whom are with EWTN, are talking about the impact, or will be talking about, I should say, the impact that Fulton Sheen has had on their own life and ministry and missions. So I think you'll enjoy chatting with Dr. Peter Howard. And then Tyler Blanski, for all the dads out there, discusses the ways that you can stay a faithful father and a faithful dad, a faithful husband. Find your fight. And that is a book by our guest, Tyler Blanski, who was recently in studio with us at Irondale to tape for some of our TV shows, including, of course, At Home with Jim and Joy Pinto. Hope you can stay around for hour number 2. Thanks for your listenership. More Catholic Connection coming your way on EWTN's Radio Extra.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Friday morning. It's July 31st. Great to be with you. Hour number 2 of EWTN's Catholic Connection. Hope you enjoyed the first hour with Father Spitzer. Isn't he amazing? We're going to have him back on. I told him after the interview that, okay, I had like 100 more questions that I have to ask him. So we're scheduling another interview with him to pre-record because he is out there in California and gets up very early to be with us. So we're going to be recording another interview with Father Spitzer fairly soon, and you don't want to miss it. We'll let you know when that will be airing. Coming up in hour number 2 on a Friday morning, July 31st, 2026. Again, we're revisiting an interview we did with Dr. Peter Howard, the America's Saint Conference. It's an event dedicated to the life and legacy of Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen, scheduled for September 23rd at the Hilton St. Louis. And it's a full-day conference aiming to celebrate his beatification and inspire attendees through his teachings and contributions. So again, it's taking place at the Hilton St. Louis, and the date is September 23rd. And it's a huge conference. There are so many amazing speakers, including many people from EWTN, and it's going to be a great event. It's filling up, though. That's why we wanted to re-air this interview, to remind you that if you do want to attend, you need to schedule, but you need to schedule quickly. So looking forward to that again and sharing that with you. Dr. Peter Howard, who's running really the whole event and is the point person for this, he's joining us to give us more details on how you can register, and again, register quickly. Then we're also going to be sharing another interview with our friend Tyler Blanski. He's written a beautiful book, Find Your Fight. It's published by our friends at Ave Maria Press. And he was recently on our campuses taping some television interviews, so we sat down with him for 2 segments to talk about this wonderful book. They call it a raw, witty, and deeply honest book. Blanski explores the hidden heroism of ordinary fatherhood through personal stories, spiritual insights, and no-nonsense encouragement. And I think I may have mentioned this song before, but I want to encourage you, speaking of encouragement, to see if you can Google a song by Carly Simon that came out many moons ago, I think, in the 90s. It's called The Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of. And it's not obviously a Catholic or a Christian song. It was a pop song, but it's a beautiful ballad about ordinary life. And don't take what you have for granted, because even though you think it's ordinary, it's actually extraordinary. So keep that in mind. Maybe you can listen to that with your spouse, and thanks be to God for all the gifts that you have, even if you don't think your life is that wonderful. When we stop and do reflect and pray, we really have so many gifts for which to be thankful. So it should be a great hour. We are going to be talking about a wonderful conference all about the amazing, soon-to-be beatified Archbishop Fulton Sheen, and then a little gift for our dads this morning. Stay strong. You're so important. My father was so important in my life. My mother was too, but I would say I was even closer to my father. And he's the reason that I stuck with broadcasting. It's such a competitive business. And my father said, you can do whatever you want, but you have to be willing to work hard. So good dads make such a difference, especially in the lives of young girls. Right now, though, on a Friday morning, hour number 2 here at EWTN's Radio Extra, we have to check the weather and the news for you. Let's get started with the weather for the weekend. Lots of things going on with the weather this morning, friends. The National Weather Service is saying heat is building up in the west. We have severe thunderstorms and heavy rain in the upper Midwest and Mississippi Valley. And then we have extreme critical fire weather in the northwest that's coming in tomorrow. More details. The heat wave is over the southwest, and it's intensifying, peaking and expanding into the Intermountain West and northern high plains this weekend. Severe storms and heavy rainfall expected over parts of the upper Midwest to the mid-Mississippi Valley today, and then critical to extreme critical fire weather conditions from the northwest and the northern Great Basin on Saturday and Sunday. Right now, it's a few minutes past the hour. Hope your Friday, last day of July, is going well. Again, let's take a look at the news here on EWTN. EWTN News reporting this morning, a major health system in Michigan facing a 6-figure payout to one of its former physician assistants, whom the institution fired after she refused to adhere to LGBT-related policies. The University of Michigan Health West system will also create now a religious accommodation for employees who do not wish to assist with transgender-related transitions or so-called transitions or procedures, or use LGBT pronouns in a way that violate religious beliefs. The legal group First Liberty Institute announcing the settlement on July 29th, revealing that Valerie Kloosterman and her attorneys would receive $410,000 in damages from the health institution. Kloosterman is a Christian and had worked at the hospital for 17 years, beginning in 2004, fired in August of 2021, after she refused to use LGBT pronouns and make referrals for transgender-related transition drugs and surgeries. That, according to a 2022 lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court. A Pandora's box, as a Bishop of Darwin, Charles Gauci, described voluntarily assisted dying in 2004, is now being thrown wide open in Australia. Darwin is the capital of the Northern Territory of the country, which is expected to legalize the practice of assisted dying within the next few weeks. Now, if that happens, so-called voluntary assisted dying, or VAD, will be legal in every state and every territory of Australia. Archbishop Anthony Fisher of Sydney arguing this idea of telehealth has turned into teledeath and he's pushing for protections for Catholic healthcare institutions.
One thing is that the church in those countries that already have experience of euthanasia can help with educating people in other countries about its very real risk. How quickly we went in this country from having no euthanasia legal at all to now more than 14,000 people have applied for it, more than 7,000 have died from it. Very quickly, all the so-called safeguards, there are pushes then to remove them one by one. So I think the experience in countries like Australia, like Holland, like Canada, can be instructive for the church in other parts of the world when it's trying to make the case for being reverent and safeguarding human life. The push, for instance, at the moment here for telehealth, so-called, which is really teledeath, is to use the long-distance means such as the internet and the telephone to grant euthanasia to people without any serious consultation with a doctor, without any doctor having ever met them or talked through with them what care they really need, what their present needs for palliative care might be, or for other kinds of medical treatment.
Vatican News reporting just last week on July 24th, the Labour Party, the current ruling party in Australia, voting to support removing any federal barriers to teleconsultations through approving euthanasia and amended its constitution to allow members of Parliament a conscience vote on future voluntary assisted dying legislation. And with 1 year to go until World Youth Day of 2027, the local organizing committee hard at work as it's moving preparations from groundwork to full implementation across all sectors, including international cooperation, pilgrim services, accommodations, transportation safety, medical care, and communications. World Youth Day occurs every few years and gathers together millions of young Catholics, and the 2027 edition will be held in South Korea, the capital there, from August 3rd to August 8th. It will be the second World Youth Day to take place in Asia, following the 1995 one in Manila, and the first country in a country where Christianity is a minority faith. Mark Mayfield tells us the president says a major deal to disarm the Palestinian militant group Hamas has been reached.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the Board of Peace has reached an agreement that would involve the complete disarmament of all armed groups in Gaza. Trump says as part of the deal, Israel will withdraw from the enclave and a new Palestinian government will be created. The agreement is set to be implemented in carefully structured phases. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, a former Israeli government spokesperson, Ilan Levy, is viewing the announcement with some caution.
We have to be very skeptical of Hamas, which has tried at every opportunity to slip through every nook and cranny to ensure its survival and sabotage peace agreements.
And again, in a post on Truth Social, the president saying the Board of Peace are reaching that agreement, and that would involve the complete disarmament of all armed groups in Gaza as well. Trump also saying as part of that deal, Israel will withdraw from the enclave and a new Palestinian government could be created. The agreement is set to be implemented again in carefully structured phases. Senate Republicans are blocking a resolution that would have required the president to withdraw U.S. troops from Iran, with Republican Senators Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul joining Democrats in support.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 15. The motion is not agreed to.
Thursday's vote came as lawmakers are continuing to debate the expanding conflict with concerns growing over the safety of U.S. service members and rising energy prices. The Senate considering similar war powers measures multiple times as the Trump administration continues military operations and negotiations over the future of the conflict. Scott Carr tells us the president is also holding a cabinet meeting at Camp David today. He has details.
The meeting at the Maryland presidential retreat comes after the U.S. and Iran resumed attacks after the collapse of a ceasefire agreement. Reports say some Republicans have expressed concerns to the White House as the war continues, with midterm elections less than 100 days away. After the meeting at Camp David, Trump's expected to head to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey for the weekend. I'm Scott Carr.
The nomination of Todd Blanche as Attorney General could be withdrawn by President Trump in response to two Republican holdouts to Blanche's approval. In a Truth Social post yesterday, the president saying he has no objection to temporarily withdrawing the nomination if Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis do not do the right thing. Both have expressed reservations about confirming Blanche over Trump's proposed anti-weaponization fund. Trump's post came after the Senate Judiciary Committee postponed the vote, and that had been planned for yesterday. Ross Cullen tells us Spain sending in military reinforcements responding to a surge of migrants crossing into its territory.
Residents in the Spanish territory woke up on Friday with thousands of Moroccan immigrants sleeping in the streets after huge numbers of people overwhelmed a small brigade of Spanish frontier patrols and crossed the border between the North African country and the Spanish semi-enclave.
Yesterday, hundreds of migrants crossed the border of Morocco into a tiny Spanish territory on the northern tip of Morocco, one of Spain's two territories on the African continent. The migrants are reportedly attempting to flee into Europe after Spain recently launched a program to provide legal status for some 500,000 undocumented migrants. Spanish authorities say about 2,000 migrants have already made their way over the border in the past few days, and around 20 have died trying. Sarah Lee Kessler tells us a New Jersey man who pleaded guilty to ramming his vehicle into a Jewish religious group's headquarters in New York will now be freed, and soon.
Dan Sohail was sentenced to time served this week, though he'll have to do a few more days in jail before being released next week. A Brooklyn federal court judge denied a request by prosecutors to keep Sohail behind bars, citing a psychiatric evaluation and saying the attack was not motivated by anti-Semitism. Sohail has already spent 6 months locked up. He admitted to ramming his vehicle into the Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in Brooklyn back in January. I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
Thanks for tuning in to hour number 2 of EWTN's Catholic Connection on a Friday morning. Very excited to share with you an interview we did regarding this amazing conference that's coming up in St. Louis in September, all about, of course, the beatification of Fulton Sheen. And so many incredible speakers will be sharing their personal connection in terms of what Fulton Sheen has done for their faith and for their ministries. You don't want to miss that because you know what? Tickets are already selling very, very quickly. And then some great advice for dads. All of this plus more on a Friday morning edition of Catholic Connection, hour number 2. We'll be right back. Wait till you get a load of the speakers at this conference. When I say just jam-packed with amazing speakers, many of whom are familiar to our EWTN viewers and listeners, it's incredible. Talking to us right now is Dr. Peter Howard. He's the founder and president of the Fulton Sheen movement, and we're talking to him today about the America's Saint Conference, a one-day event on the eve of the great Fulton Sheen's beatification. And Dr. Peter Howard, thank you so much for joining us. This is very exciting. Good morning.
Good morning, Teresa. Yeah, this is extremely exciting, and I really hope that we can get everyone there that wants to go.
It's not that far away. I mean, I know we're still in July, but this is coming up toward the end of September. It's Wednesday, September 23rd in St. Louis. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, it's September 23rd. It's the eve, so it's all day before the actual beatification Mass on September 24th. And as you mentioned, we have an incredible lineup for this conference. It's called America's Saint because he's the one saint that everyone, I think, in this country can relate to most. And as Fulton Sheen put it himself, he says, we need an American saint, one who was born here, raised to what everybody would consider sort of like Americana. You know, you're born on the farms, you're
right.
working the fields, Catholic schools, and all of that. So this is a conference that is put together to bring everybody to the very heart of why Fulton Sheen is being beatified and why he's being beatified right now at this critical moment in our nation's history, and I would say the history of the church. So we have, it's all day, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. All the information on this conference can be found at fultonsheenconference.com. People can register right there. We even have space available for people at the Hilton where it's being held in Frontenac, just outside of the city center in St. Louis. And yes, we have an extraordinary lineup of speakers that cover, I would say, very different angles of why Sheen's so important because of the impact on their lives. Not just they like Sheen, they watched him on TV. Their lives have been deeply touched, just as mine was. My entire life was changed once I got introduced to Fulton Sheen 30 years ago. So we wanted people who could share similar stories to inspire people of why he's so needed right now.
Well, let me just go over this list. In addition to yourself serving as the MC and the host of this beautiful conference, you have our very own Monsignor Roger Landry, who's just a staple here at EWTN, Catholic priest and commentator. Jason Jones is an amazing filmmaker and author. He's been a guest on this program. All these folks have been guests on my show, and I know them all. Dale Ahlquist, the Society of G.K. Chesterton. Sister Dee Dee, oh my gosh, she's one of my favorites. Sister Dee Dee Burns, she's off the charts. Sherry Ballinger, Father Thomas Loya, he has a radio show all about Light of the East. John Yep, Catholics for Catholics. This is incredible. Father Jason Sharon. I mean, on and on and on. And you're even going to announce more speakers. Now, here's the thing. It's one day, so it's only one day to talk about Fulton Sheen. You probably need a whole month at least. But you mentioned most of them are going to be giving testimonies. Will they be concentrating, Doctor, on different aspects of Fulton Sheen's ministry, or mainly just sharing their own story, as you mentioned earlier, and how he impacted their lives?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, because it's what about Sheen's mission that touched them, because pretty much everybody on this list is working for souls. I'd say actually
right.
All of them are. And so there's something that inspired him about the Sheen's very purpose of why he was given to the church, and they're continuing that in some way. Like Jason Jones, Vulnerable People Project, he's in the media. He captures a dimension of Sheen that isn't really talked about that much at all, especially what would Sheen say about all these things that are happening against the vulnerable, whether it be in Africa and the Middle East. And so he's a voice of that. I see him as one of the great champions of Sheen in that respect. We have Father Thomas Loya, Father Jason Sharon, who you mentioned. They represent a side of Sheen that hardly is ever talked about. Sheen was bi-ritual. He was he was Byzantine and Roman. How do we understand both? You could say both lungs of Fulton Sheen, of the East and the West, because Sheen he was the first bishop or priest, really, at the same time, to say the Divine Liturgy in English. Many people don't know that. So he is a truly Catholic figure, and everyone here, even Dale Ahlquist, G.K. Chesterton. Fulton Sheen was known as the American Chesterton. Why is that? What wisdom did they share? How was one the extension of the other? So it's extremely powerful to see how these things are coming out. Like it's Tammy Peterson, she's had a very deep personal connection with Fulton Sheen during her conversion to the Catholic faith. So this is why I think it's going to be so important and so powerful, because it really does touch the hearts of those who are going to be there to be inspired. This is not tell me about Fulton Sheen. There's going to be millions of those things, and you can find them online. This is the encountering the living Sheen now, and that's why I think this conference stands apart from so many other things.
Absolutely. The website is FultonSheenConference.com. Again, FultonSheenConference.com. We're talking with Dr. Peter Howard, founder of the Fulton Sheen Institute and Fulton Sheen Movement. So take us back when you were first exposed to the great Fulton Sheen, Peter.
It felt like chance. I went on a personal retreat. This was almost 30 years ago, and I was in Texas discerning my life, and my sister handed me cassette tapes and said, "Pete, why don't you listen to these? It might help you out." Honestly, my first inclination was, I don't know. I kind of have my Lenten mixtape of John Michael Talbot and all this stuff ready to go. But it was a providential moment. And like Sheen says, there's a few moments in decisions in life that determine your whole course of life. For me, that was one of them. And for a weekend, I sat and listened to this entire retreat given to priests and seminarians. And while that wasn't what God called me to do, I knew from that one retreat that my entire life was going to be wrapped up in Fulton Sheen, not just personally, but in his mission, especially the daily holy hour, and just what the church needs in this critical time. So that's how I got introduced, and then I was able to do my doctorate on Fulton Sheen, write a book on Fulton Sheen, and then everything I've done since then has been, how do I bring him into the heart of every home?
How many times are you amazed, even overwhelmed, and I know many of us are, when we listen? Of course, we run so many different segments of his talks on the air still at EWTN, which is so awesome because he has so much material with which we can share with our listeners. But I listened to him talking about the evils of the world, and Peter, they're evergreen. They're about exactly what's happening right now.
They are, exactly. And he understood the roots of everything. He always talked about, like, you can look at wars and see how those things develop. But he says, if you don't understand the revolution underneath it, then you'll never really understand what's going on. He says, only those with faith really know what's going on in the world. It's a strong statement. But when you do that, when you look through it with a theological lens, you can see everything that's happening, and it's like a tree. From an acorn to what it is today, this is the fruits of what he talked about, what he even prophesied about. He said we're at the end of an era. And so what he said during his life is even more important and more relevant now. And that's another reason why I think every Catholic needs to rediscover what he had to say about our moment right now.
Now, I'm imagining that this will all be in person, or are you sharing any of this online? We
do have a plan to share it online as well. So you can find that information on our website, fultonsheenconference.com. That way we can reach people outside the United States. We have conversations with other countries. So this is a project in the works that's just expanding. God's blessing it. And so, yes, we have a streaming option that will be available.
Okay, that's great. Well, we'll have to have you back on as it gets closer, unless you sell out, which I'm sure you will. How are the ticket sales going already?
I have to check with my wife, but we have our whole team that's on that. I'm focusing on all the content, so we kind of stay in our zones. But I know it's going well, but we are also trying to reach we're trying to reach a lot of people even within the local community of St. Louis. A lot of times they don't even realize that something's in their backyard. And this is like the singular event that's leading up to the beatification. And I can't stress that enough. That's extraordinary. So don't miss this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience that will never, ever happen again, ever. So I always tell people, don't miss this opportunity to be a part of history.
Yeah, September 23rd, it's taking place in St. Louis at the Hilton St. Louis, and it is going to be an amazing conference. I mean, the speakers, as you just heard us review the lineup, I mean, it's just crazy. All these people in one place, and when you realize who's speaking, you're going to want to go either in person, online, or maybe even both. Monsignor Landry, Jason Jones, Sister Dee Dee, oh my goodness, it's just going to be incredible. Dale Ahlquist as well. And, of course, Monsignor Landry, we love him. He's fantastic, one of our regular commentators here at EWTN. Peter, thank you so much. The conference is coming up September 23rd in St. Louis, FultonSheenConference.com. In studio with us this morning, because he is going to be taping with the wonderful Jim and Joy Pinto at Home with Jim and Joy. His name is Tyler Blanski, and we're talking about his beautiful new book, Find Your Fight, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle. Tyler, I was saying in introducing you, I felt like we should play the Rocky theme or something. What do you think?
I feel like that's very generous, and the book doesn't deserve it.
I love Sylvester Stallone. I know he's Italian and all that, but I just think he's a good guy. He's still out there, speaking truth and supporting conservative causes. Anyway, tell us about the book. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. It's such an honor to be here, Teresa. And Find Your Fight, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle. I love the title. I couldn't have come up with it myself. It's that good. I think when I submitted to the publisher, it was originally called, very poetically, A Father Looks at 40. And it was kind of a midlife crisis, what to do.
Well, it has nice alliteration, A Father Looks at 40,
yes,
right?
Yes. And it was at first a reflection on What happens when you're in your 40s and you're doing your morning stretches and all that original fire that was in your belly when you were a teenager and in your 20s and building something in your 30s? What happens when the dust settles and you're just a boring dad in the suburbs, driving your minivan around with the kids, soccer practice, basketball coaching? What do you do? So find your fight. I love, it's such a strong word, fight. But what I mean by that is actually much simpler. I think a lot of dads, when you're a bachelor, you can wake up when you want to wake up. You can come home after a long day of work and cook dinner and do what you want to do. When you're a dad, you never get to do what you want to do. You're up with the kids. You feel like you've run a race before 7 o'clock, just getting them ready for school. Then you go to work. Then you pick up the kids. It's just you're on all the time, and you want to check out. You want to look at your phone. You want to watch a show. You want to listen to Teresa on the radio.
Shameless plug. I didn't tell him to say that, by the way.
Anything but the monotony. And so when I say find your fight, what I want people to imagine, husbands and fathers out there, is to find your fight is just to put your phone down, look at your wife, tell her she's beautiful, start dancing with her in the kitchen, pick up the baseball glove, go play catch with your son, wrestle the kids. If your teenager's up in their room alone, pull them out of their room, bring them downstairs. Don't check out. Find your fight. Do just one more day, one day at a time. Get up and get after it.
Mm-hmm. But what I love is I'm thinking find your fight. I'm thinking that fire in your belly for what really matters most, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Paul in 1 Corinthians talks about how he wishes everyone could be a bachelor like him, because then they could be 100%, Jesus all day. But he concedes, the world still must be peopled. And so he admits a married man, in his words, Paul says his interests are divided. He's called to please Christ. It's interesting that he uses the word please. He's called to please Christ and to please his wife. Mm-hmm. And it's a tug of war. I think wife, when I read that passage, kind of symbolizes the world of not just a woman, but the world. He's called to be a provider, to build a home, to be a participant in the local economy, to have an impact. He's got all these things on his shoulders. He's also called to please Christ. And if this was a Venn diagram, these circles overlap. And that's right where God calls men to be, is right in between. Any father's called to be there, pleasing Christ and pleasing his wife in the world and pursuing, being a fisher of men, all at the same time.
What's interesting is sometimes the world may make men feel that way, or even, women, as wives and mothers feel that, oh, well, this is all I have. But what you talk about in the subtitle, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle, that's not settling by dedicating your life to your family. Obviously, God is first, but you're doing that out of love for God and your commitments and letting your yes be yes and your no be no. But it's not settling. It's really, I think, stepping up to the occasion and embracing it and loving your life.
Yeah. I love that you picked that up. I was hesitant about the word settle because settling down is anything but settling.
Right.
We think we need to pursue what's just around the river bend, just over the horizon line, perhaps a career or moving. Often God is calling men to really pony up and get going right where they are. It's hard work to stay put, but that's the way of the farmer. That's the way of building anything worth building, is seeing it through. And usually it happens right here at home.
Well, I love the fact that you're drawing on the Chesterton paradox. Ordinary things are more extraordinary.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, Chesterton, he wasn't a dad, but he's like a father to us all. He's like that uncle you wish you had. Always smoking, larger than life, full of wisdom, maybe giving it out when you're not ready for it. But yeah, the ordinary is extraordinary. So Find Your Fight. It's a beautiful little paperback. Ave Maria Press was very kind to publish it with creamy pages. I know all the dads, I'm in like 2 book clubs at my parish. None of the dads read books anymore. They're all listening to audiobooks. So I was very disappointed that we couldn't make it an audiobook for its initial release. I was like, dads just aren't going to read it. It's going to sit on their bedside. But I tell you what, guys, it's going to look really good on your bedside. And if you want to skip right ahead to the chapter about marriage and sex and bringing that energy back to your marriage bed and your home, maybe jump ahead, I don't know, to chapter 7. It's called Complicity. Or no, it's called The Secret to a Happy Marriage. Or just start with the beginning, which is all about the day I had to find my fight, which is actually a story similar to yours, except the opposite, Teresa. I was doing my dream job, which was full-time ministry. I was the DRE at a parish, and I just loved it. I'm a convert, was going to be an Anglican priest, and got married and had children and became Catholic. And it was the best of both worlds. I could talk about my faith and the Bible and open up history and theology all day. But I couldn't provide for my family. Which is totally fine. A parish doesn't necessarily need to have that kind of funding. But it was tight. We had always lived on a shoestring budget, but it was the day my minivan broke on the side of the road, and it was a hot summer day. The toddler was screaming, the baby was screaming, my wife was crying. I was totally, screwed. And I couldn't afford to fix the van. I couldn't afford to take my family out to Culver's, which is a kind of a fast food place up in Wisconsin. And I remember thinking, I'm doing what I love, and I can tell I'm having an impact. But I think as a dad, I need to do something that I don't love for the sake of my family. Yeah. And I had to find my fight.
We're going to pick it up on the other side of the break. I want to remind folks to whom we're speaking, Tyler Blanski, author and speaker, beautiful new book published by our friends at Ave Maria Press, Find Your Fight, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle. And he's also going to be featured this week on At Home with Jim and Joy Pinto. We'll be right back. I know you're dying to hear the rest of the story. Well, first you have to get the book. As a fellow author, I want you to pick up the book written by our friend Tyler Blanski, who's in studio with us this morning, back at the ranch in Irondale, Alabama, because he's going to be taping with At Home, Jim and Joy, this week, 2 episodes. Find Your Fight is the name of the book, published by Ave Maria Press, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle. Okay, so last when we were speaking to you, you were on the side of the road, broken down van, wife crying, kids screaming. Then what happens?
I was doing what I loved, and I was pretty good at it. I don't know. It's one of those things like someone's always better than you, but I felt very fulfilled. I loved seeing, when I was teaching, I loved seeing the light go on in people's eyes and watching people connect the dots. And it felt like a calling to help people grow in their faith, to bring life, in my own little way to a parish. I just loved it. It was an amazing parish in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, called St. Jerome's. And I miss those people so much. But it was a moment. I remember I went to the Adoration Chapel, and I basically laid it all down at the feet of our Lord and was like, God, what do you want me to do? I feel like I'm doing what I thought you wanted me to do. Yep. But I also entered the sacrament of marriage, and my vocation's to be a dad, and it's not about the money, but I need to make some more money for these people that you've put in my life. Maybe St. Joseph felt this way when he was like, I think I got to go to Egypt. He probably hated Egypt. He had to do it. So Brittany and I put our heads together, my wife and I, and we brainstormed. And for a while, we're like, well, maybe she could work. We could get another job. But no, it was just, at the end of the day, it came back to me. We had little babies, and I had to buck up. So I had a degree in Christian studies and then a master's of divinity, and these degrees are totally worthless in the real world, so to speak. So I became a salesman, and I hated sales, and we moved back to Minnesota to be close to family and put down roots at a parish where we could be close to family. And I just crashed and burned. Every day I woke up, I had to make cold calls. We had to move into the ghetto, this really bad apartment, 900 square feet. There was mold. My kids were sick. The police were outside our door all the time. The smell of marijuana on the streets. It's hard to describe the feeling of humility, of failing at business, being a horrible salesman, and then tucking your kids into bed at night, doing it all for them in the first place. But sometimes you got to take 2 steps back before you can go 3 steps forward. But so one day I did a novena to St. Joseph, and I really do think his intercession, something just clicked, and I began to have fun with it. And I think a dad, you have to do what you don't feel like doing every day. For me, it was the career. I had to I had to become a businessman, and I did what I didn't feel like doing until all of a sudden it became fun, and I turned it into a game, and the sales
How did you
started.
turn it into a game? How did you do
Okay,
that?
so I had to sell print advertising in a digital age to start a magazine.
Wow.
And so I'm going around, I have to cold call, and you turn in the metrics, you turn it into a game, and you turn your failures into a laughable moment, and you learn to love getting to hear the word no. And you learn to lean into the power plays that some of these business owners do, and how to make them feel like a winner if they want to be a winner, or that they're in control. And I just had fun with it, and would literally do things like laugh before dialing, just to, it sends a rush of energy through your body. All these silly things. Buy myself a donut after a sale. And God provided. We got out of the hood. Now we're in a great home, and it's been very meaningful to provide for my family this way. But it led to this book, which is what happens when God isn't calling you to be a missionary to Mongolia, or a monk in a distant mountain, or a full-time staff person at a parish. What if he's calling you to be to move to the suburbs and become one of those soccer dads who's a businessman? Like, where does that fit into the kingdom of God? And I had an identity crisis, which led to this book. Had to reread a lot of scripture and rethink how I had thought about what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, because I thought it was supposed to be radical. And my life, in obedience to my vocation as a father and husband and a Catholic, ended up not looking radical at all. It looked almost like a compromise. Had I become worldly? Had I pursued the American dream instead of holiness? So that's what Find Your Fight explores, is what does the pursuit of happiness have to do with the pursuit of holiness? What does living for heaven and being not of this world have to do with diversifying your portfolio and packing the 529s for college and braces, and maybe you're thinking about an addition as you have your 4th or your 5th kid? What does that have to do with the kingdom of God? And my contention is everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Like from Adam to the new Adam, men are called to be builders and doers and makers. And even Christ as a husband, I love his words of promise. He's going to make a place for us. He's building something right now. I just love that.
I do think being a good husband and a good father and embracing that is radical, because it really goes against the grain in terms of the world looking down on family life and always attacking the family, and what it takes to be a good husband and a good dad. I mean, I see this. My husband and I don't have children, but we've been married for 43 years, and my godson, our nephew, is raising 3 beautiful girls, he and his wife, and I see his dedication to her and to them. And it takes so much, but it's so beautiful to see it. I mean, the sacrifice, yes, but the results. I mean, it's incredible what you're doing. Just last night, let me give you an example. We were eating dinner outside at one of our restaurants here in central Italy, And one of our favorite things to do is to watch families, because it's in this part of Italy, the small towns, that they have tons of kids, and it's great. They come out and they all eat together. And there was this adorable little girl behind us, and she was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old. And she wasn't fussy. She was just inquisitive. She did not want to sit. She wanted to go around to the tables and talk to everybody. And every 2 minutes, the father was getting out, and he was trying to let the mom eat. The father was getting up, picking her up, walking her around, and I ended up talking to them in our bad Italian. But to me, it was so beautiful to see the father take over, allow his wife to have some time, and he was just there for that little girl. And that is it makes such a statement.
Yeah, it really does. I love being a little rebel. I rebelled my way into the Catholic Church. Right now in my neighborhood, which is a pretty progressive area of because Minnesota is a pretty blue state. I fly my American flag. I feel like such a rebel with my American flag and my 4 kids. And what I love about being Catholic is I actually don't have to say too much. My life is just so loud. I don't need a weird flag. I don't need a custom bumper sticker. I don't need a tagline. I'm just living it. And I love how the neighbors come up and start talking to me. This super woke woman across the street, she came over last summer and she just kind of stopped. We're chatting. We're getting the mail, and she just looks around. She's like, "Wow, this is such a happy yard." And I was like, "Thank you." And I was like, "This is awesome. This is evangelism, is what it is.
Right, exactly.
It isn't keeping up with the Joneses. It isn't showing off. What it is it's an invitation. It's a witness." I have a whole chapter called "Why I Mow the Lawn," and it's not because I'm some weird yard guy. My grass, there's nothing extraordinary about my yard. It's just that it's, I don't know, well kept. There's no trash. There's no, it's not like filled with weeds and, random tricycles falling over, piled up in a corner. I try to keep things tidy, and I try to share whenever we can. We're just out there with our kids playing, and it is a witness. You don't need to say anything more.
So in terms of what you're doing now, I mean, looking back, you loved what you did in the parish, then you became very successful in sales. Now you're running the Minnesota Catholic, you're writing books, you've written at least 3 books, you're speaking. How do you think it has worked out for you? How do you feel now in what you're doing in your ministry?
I don't even know where to be. I feel, so we just had our 4th baby. Every time I have a child, my world falls apart. I have all this inspiration. I'm writing books, and then a baby comes, and I'm like a blank slate again. I'm like Play-Doh. My head's in a blender. I just have to stay the course. I have to do good by my clients, do good by my family, make sure that we can manage dance, ballet, baseball.
Sports.
Yeah, my son wants to get out on the water to fish. All these things. Grocery shopping. I love grocery delivery. I'm just discovering this service. So all of this, I think right now my job is just to be faithful in the daily tasks. I have to chuckle because that's kind of what the book is about. Yeah. I'm just living the book right now.
Practicing what you're preaching?
Yeah. Like if I could, I'd be writing a book. I'm working on a few, but I can't. I can't do it. I can't pick up the guitar. There's so many things a dad would love to do. I know someone would push back against this and say, hey, it's important for you to keep your hobbies and your interests going. I would respond that there's a season for everything.
Yes.
There's a season to have newborns. There's a season of toddlers. There's a season where you don't get to work out. You get to become a fat, happy dad who's tired and with bloodshot eyes. That's your job. There's something actually really healthy about that, but it's a season and it flies by. There's a season of sacrifice, and there's a season of abundance and prosperity, and God has a purpose for all of it. So to answer your question, I'm finding my fight literally, which is so fun. I hadn't thought about this until now. Like, just the way it is in the book is, you got to get up. You cannot start scrolling social media or, I don't know, always looking for the next window to smoke another cigar by yourself. Like, you got to stay active and step up even when you don't feel like it, because they are brief moments with your kids. I'm already nostalgic about, my oldest is 12.
How old is your oldest now?
He's 12, and he's not cute and little anymore, and it makes me so sad. But I love him to pieces. He's growing into a young man,
And they grow up so fast. My grandnieces, we, as I said, don't have any children, but we're very close to my godsons, 3 girls, and the 2 oldest are identical twins, and I can't believe they're going to be 10. And we're like the grandparents on this side of the family because my sister died before they were born, and so we kind of took the role of the grandparents on our side of the family. And I cannot believe the youngest is going to be 6. They're going to be 10. I don't know where it went. I do not know where it went.
Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting. Find Your Fight. I don't like dad books. I don't know if I've read a book for dads, which is funny, having written one. But this isn't a parenting book. There's actually no parenting advice in it at all. And that's just because I don't really have much to give. I don't even know what I would say. It really is a book that will help fathers go dig deep, remember their higher why, find that fire again, maybe just inspire them to rekindle the romance with their wives, to remember the beauty of an ordinary life. And I think to be a homemaker, I know that we often use that word to describe what a woman does in the home, but I think historically the man was the one who built the home. He built the wall. He tilled the fields, and men have forgotten this. We are the ones that need to have a say, have an interest in the home. It's a place of refuge. It's your castle. It's the most quoted verse in the founding fathers in the time of the founding was Micah 4:4, that every man sit under his vine tree and under his fig, and that no man make him afraid.
Yeah. Tyler, we're out of time, but boy, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you're doing amazing work, especially I think you've found your fight being with your family. The book is entitled Find Your Fight, Rugged Wisdom for Faithful Dads Who Refuse to Settle, and he is on At Home, which you enjoy this week. Don't miss it.